Welcome. In this video, we will discuss about the recent judgment provided by the NGT on the Biodiversity Management Committees, as well as in terms of what is Pbrs. So before we actually go and try to understand about the BMC or Biodiversity Management Committees and Pbrs, we will before that, first of all, let's go ahead and try to understand about NGT and what all power it has. Then we will move ahead and also try to understand about the Biodiversity Act of 2002. And after that, once that is done, we will be able to understand BMC and Pbrs, which is one of the mandates under the Biodiversity Act. So this is the overall outline of this video. So let's start. So first of all, let's try to understand about the NGT. So it is a statutory body established in 2010 under the National Green Tribunal Act of 2010. So basically it is a statutory body. So we have the tribunals under the constitution also. For an example, CAT. That is a constitutional body which is defined under the constitution itself, but the NGT over here is a statutory body. So just remember, and this is actually important from the polity perspective, that you are able to understand what is a statutory body. Simply very basic understanding, if a body has been mentioned under constitution, then it's going to be a constitutional body. If it has been formed through act of the legislature, which is like our parliament, if any body has come into being because of any legislation passed by the parliament, then that body is known as the statutory body. We also have something called as executive body, which are generally formed because of the notification of the government. So these are the basic understanding regarding the statutory, executive and constitutional body. So just remember now, NGT is a, which one? It is a statutory body. So the inspiration is drawn from Article 21, which is about the protection of life and personal liberty, which assures the citizen of India the right to a healthy environment. So through various judgments, we know that the entire scope of Article 21 has been widened by the Supreme Court. So scope of Article 21 has been widened by Supreme Court, in which they have very remarkably has said that when we talk about life, it is not mere existence but life with dignity. And from the mere sentence, we can understand that there is a right to clean environment also included in it. So if we are really into a bad environment, into an unhealthy environment, polluted environment, we are not able to live life properly. So in that regard, it is infringing on the Article 21, which is provide to right to life and personal liberty to every individual. So in that regard, NGT kind of draw its inspiration from there. The primary purpose of the tribunal is to handle expeditious disposal of the cases pertaining to environmental issues. So the idea of tribunal comes from the face that the general court, like your SC, the Supreme Court, High Courts and even the district courts, over here what happened, the judges are not very well versed with all the technicalities of a particular topic. So in case of National Green Tribunal, the judges over here are the people who have read about the environmental laws or who have more expertise to deal with the environment cases, and that is the whole purpose of having the NGT in the first place. So they will go ahead and go for the expeditious disposal of the cases pertaining to the environmental issues. So this is the major outline of your NGT. Now go ahead and let's also talk about what are the powers of NGT. So this is very important for you to know for which all acts actually NGT could provide any kind of judgment. So NGT has power to hear all civil cases relating to environmental issues and questions that are linked to the implementation of laws listed in Schedule 1 of the NGT Act. So I just told you NGT Act is the one through which the NGT was established, and there are certain laws which are mentioned in the Schedule 1. What are those laws in which the NGT could hear the cases? So this is the list. So if you see over here, Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act, Water Prevention and Control of Cess Act of 1977, Forest Conservation Act of 1980, Air Prevention and Control of Pollution of 1981, then Environment Protection Act of 1986, Public Liability Insurance Act of 1991, the Biological Diversity Act of 2002. All these acts are actually part of the acts for which the NGT could go ahead and provide the judgments on. But from here, if you see, these are the only act on which is actually could go ahead and hear the cases for, which essentially means that it cannot held or it cannot hear any case which is pertaining to the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 or even the Indian Forest Act of 1927. So these two acts are beyond its ambit, and these two acts, any case pertaining to that will not be heard by the NGT. So this is something which you need to know. Apart from that, there are various other laws also which are enacted by a state relating to forest tree conservation. So all these are also beyond it. So this is very exclusive list for which actually NGT has the power to hear the cases on. So I hope you understood. This is the basic guideline. This is important from your examination point of view, because there in your prelims UPSC could really go ahead and ask that whether NGT could provide judgment on this particular case or not. So this is something you could like try to understand. Now let's move forward to the next section of our video, where we will try to understand about the Biodiversity Act of 2002. So Biodiversity Act of 2002 was enacted for prevention of biological diversity in India and to provide a mechanism for equitable sharing of benefits arising of the use of traditional biological resources and knowledge. In short, what does actually mean over here? The Biodiversity Act of India 2002 is actually to give effect to the Convention on Biodiversity, in which there is like three principles. The one is obviously the conservation of biodiversity. Then they talk about the sustainable development, sustainable use of the biodiversity, and finally there is also a factor of what is called as the access to the resources. So all these three factors are implemented in our Biodiversity Act of 2002, which is kind of the Indian law implementing the CBT. And this access to the resources, just for your information, in the CBT is actually held under the Nagoya Protocol. So just an additional information, just remember that the access to the resources has been mentioned in the Nagoya Protocol of the CBT. Now, the Act has enacted to meet the obligations under the Convention on Biodiversity, to which India is a party. We just mentioned about it. The Act defined biodiversity as the variability among living organisms from all sources and ecological complexes of which they are part, and includes diversity within the species or between species and of ecosystem. So this is the definition, this is the all encompassing definition of biodiversity which is being mentioned in the Act. The Acts provide for three-tiered institutional structure at the national, state and local level. So this is the important aspect, that we cannot conserve the biodiversity only from the top. It has to be, all the levels has to be involved in order to protect the biodiversity, and especially the at the local level or at the like the grassroots level. It is very important that you are involving the community to actually conserve the biodiversity. National Biodiversity Authority is a statutory autonomous body established under the Act at a national level to implement the provision under the Act. So what is the national level body? It is your National Biodiversity Authority. So these are very few things that you should know about the Act. There are other features and other clauses also which is beyond the scope of this video, but I will really advise that you go ahead and check what is the provision regarding the traditional knowledge in this Act. What is about the IP or what you can intellectual property in case of plants. What are all these issues? These are also very important for your examination point of view. So I will really advise you go ahead and check out these topics as well. Now let's come back and try to understand about the biodiversity management committees. So biodiversity management committees are to be established under the Act at the local level. So now this is an important fact, that these are the committees which are going to work at the local level, and they are very important. So BMC play a vital role in documenting biodiversity. their sustainable use, and in dealing with access and benefit sharing issues. So we just talk about that access and benefit sharing is one of the very important component of CBD as well as of the Biodiversity Act also. So these BMC, when they are like going ahead and at the local level counting the biodiversity and looking out for the sustainable, that is where they can actually go and figure out the issues related to access and benefit sharing. BMCs are created for promoting conservation, sustainable use, and documentation of biodiversity for local bodies across the country. So, this is their mandate. They have to promote or make people aware about the conservation of biodiversity, promote the idea of sustainable use, as well as document the biodiversity as well. The main function of the BMC is to prepare people's biodiversity register in consultation with the local people. So people's biodiversity registers are the things that they need to create in order to document all the biodiversity. PRB preparation is mandatory under the BD Act. So we just read about the BD Act. In that it is mandatory that these BMCs are going ahead and creating a PBR, and it is the primary responsibility of every BMC. But what is there on the ground? It is actually revealed only 7% of the BMCs have prepared their PBRs, which means more than 90% has not prepared the PBR, which is their main duty. So kind of you can understand at the ground what has happened is very far away from the things which is mentioned in the Act. So Biodiversity Act made it mandatory for the BMC to create the PBRs, which is the People's Biodiversity Registers, but on ground what happened, only 7% has actually done it, and more than 90% have no PBRs so far. So this is the reality, and you just see this act came in 2002. We are in 2020 right now. So there is a long gap already taken. Almost 2 decades had happened, and if we are still seeing the figure as 7%, which means that the policymaker nearly have to look into it, and that is what exactly NGT did. It asked what is going on over here and why the BMCs are not preparing the PBRs. Then now let's just quickly understand about the People's Biodiversity Registers also. So they consist of a complete documentation of biodiversity in the area regarding plant, food source, wildlife, medicinal sources, etc. All these are the things which is going to be the content of the PBR. So it is a register, it has to contain something, right? So the content is going to be the documentation of biodiversity. As PBR help in tracing how the habitats are changing and to understand and estimate parts of our forest. So these are really very important to understand how the ecological change is happening at the ground level. PBR is also a bottom-up exercise, hence it is a means of understanding the overlap of cultural and natural biodiversity. Now this is something, the exercise of PBR will eventually help that how the forest and people are codependent. So we know that in India there are people who live in the forest dweller, what kind of dependency they have on the biodiversity. For traditional knowledge also, for an example, what plants have been used by the people from generation. So all these things are very important aspect, and once they are documented it will be easier for the policy maker to make policy around them. So this is something which need to be done, and NGT, which is your National Green Tribunal, has actually asked the BMCs to go ahead and prepare them. This is just a graphical representation that even after 14 years of promulgation of the Biodiversity Act, the BMCs are yet to be constituted by more than 81% of the local bodies in India, and the current compliance rate is only 18.46. Now this is also another, what you can say, staggering fact that the BMCs, which is your Biodiversity Management Committees, itself has not been formed by the local bodies. So the BMCs which has been formed, they were only able to register around like 7% PBRs, and even the BMC which has been created, they are also at a very staggering point of 8.46. So just try to understand that out of all the local bodies in India, only around 19%, you can say, has created the BMCs, which is your Biodiversity Management Committees, which is again a mandate of Biodiversity Act. And These BMCs which are already created, again their main duty is to have the PBRs, People Biodiversity registered. Out of this, only 7% of the BMCs has actually had the PBR. So this is the kind of a, what you can say, sorry state of the affair for the Biodiversity Management Committee so far. So this is what the NGT has actually taken into cognizance and talked about it. So I hope you have understood this video. These topics are important for your examination point of view. So I hope if you have any doubt, you will ask in the comment section of this video. Thank you.